It was the jollof rice that broke her. Adenola Bamidele had sat quietly through the whispers. She had sat through the waiter who took every other table's order first. She had even sat through the young hostess who had loudly told her colleague, loud enough that she was clearly meant to hear, "I don't know how these people just walk in anywhere." But when the manager, a sharp-faced young man named Emeka, picked up her plate, the plate she had ordered, the plate she had paid for, and carried it away saying, "We don't want this kind of customer giving the restaurant a bad name." Adenola set her handbag on the table. It was a very plain bag, worn leather, long strap, a small scratch near the clasp. What Emeka did not know, what none of them knew, was that inside that bag was a master key, and a phone with 37 unread messages, all addressed to CEO, Igrav T. A D letter 1 ECD L. Restaurant Group. But let us go back. Let us go back to how the morning had started. Adenola Bamidele had woken up at 5 o'clock, the way she always did. She had made herself a cup of Lipton tea, sat on the small balcony of her private apartment in Lekki, and looked out at the Lagos skyline. From where she sat, she could not see Igrav T. A D letter 1 ECD L. Restaurant, but she could feel it the way a mother feels a child, in the chest, steady and constant. She had built it 14 years ago with 400,000 naira, a borrowed pot, and a stubbornness that her late mother used to call the Bamidele curse. 1 room, 6 plastic chairs, a handwritten menu taped to the wall. She had cooked everything herself for the first 3 years, egusi, ofe onigbu, ayamace, and the jollof rice that people still talked about like it was a spiritual experience. Now Igrav T. A D letter 1 ECD L.A. had 3 locations across Lagos. The Victoria Island branch, the one she was visiting today, had a rooftop bar, a waiting list on Friday nights, and a head chef who had trained in Accra and London. It had been featured in 2 food magazines. A popular influencer had posted about the peppered snail and crashed the reservation system for a week. Adenola had done all of this. And today, she had decided to see exactly what was happening inside her own house. It had started with a phone call 3 weeks ago, an anonymous message sent through the restaurant's feedback portal, the one her assistant Falek managed. The message had been short. "The food is still good, but the staff treat certain customers like they are an embarrassment. Please come and see for yourself." Adenola had read it twice. Then she had called Falek and said, "Don't tell anyone I'm coming." She had dressed carefully for invisibility. A plain cotton blouse the color of dust. A simple Iro wrapper in faded purple, the kind sold in bundles at Tejuosho Market. Old rubber slippers. Her gray-streaked locks wrapped in a black scarf without ornament. No jewelry except the thin gold ring on her right hand that she never removed, her mother's ring, worn smooth with years. She looked, she knew, like someone's auntie from Mushin. She looked like a woman who had taken 2 danfos to get to Victoria Island and was treating herself to a nice meal. She looked like someone who did not belong in a restaurant with linen tablecloths and menus printed on cardstock. That was precisely the point. She had arrived at Igrav T. A D letter 1 ECD L.A. at 12:30, when the lunch crowd was thick. The restaurant smelled exactly as it should: onions and palm oil and something smoky from the grill station. The interior was warm and beautiful. Dark wood, amber lighting, framed photographs of Nigerian landscapes on the walls. She had chosen every single item in this room. The photographs had been taken by a young photographer from Ibadan whom she had paid herself. She felt, for a brief moment, the old pride. Then the hostess looked at her. Her name tag said Blessing. She was young, maybe 23, with long braids and the kind of practiced smile that disappeared the moment it wasn't needed. The smile disappeared now. "Good afternoon," Adenola said pleasantly. "1 for lunch, please." Blessing looked her up and down once. It was quick, but it was thorough. Adenola recognized the calculation happening behind the girl's eyes, the assessment, the sorting, the quiet judgment that people imagined was invisible but never was. "Do you have a reservation?" "No, but I see empty tables." "We prefer reservations." Blessing turned slightly, as if the conversation were already over. "I understand," Adenola said, still pleasant. "But it is walk-in hours, yes. Your sign at the door says walk-ins are welcome until 2 o'clock. Blessing looked at her again. A long moment passed. Then she picked up a menu, not the proper laminated one she handed to others, but an older, slightly bent one from the back of the stack, and led Adenola to a table near the kitchen door. The worst table in the restaurant. The one closest to the noise and the heat and the swinging door that smacked every 3 minutes. Adenola sat down without comment. She opened the bent menu and read it carefully, though she had written the descriptions herself. She ordered the jollof rice with grilled tilapia and a bottle of water. The waiter, a young man named Chitty according to his tag, wrote nothing down, nodded vaguely, and walked away to take the order of a couple who had arrived after her. She waited. Tables around her received their food. A group of women in matching asoebi celebrated something loudly near the window. A man in a suit took a phone call and laughed too hard. The swinging kitchen door hit her chair 3 times. Her order did not come. After 30 minutes, she raised her hand. Chitty walked past without meeting her eyes. She raised her hand again. A different waiter came, looked confused, and went to find Chitty. Chitty came back with a look of mild inconvenience, as though she were the problem. "The rice is coming," he said. It came 15 minutes later. She looked at it. The presentation was careless. The fish placed without care, the sauce pooled on one side. She had seen the plates that left this kitchen for other tables. They did not look like this. She picked up her fork. That was when Emeka arrived. She had not seen him approach. She had heard him first, his voice, loud and certain, talking to Blessing near the hostess stand. She had looked up and recognized the uniform immediately. Black fabric, gold trim, the Igrav T a D letter 1 ECD L A crest. The manager's uniform. She had designed it herself. He was perhaps 30. Well-built, well-dressed, with the particular confidence of a man who had never once questioned whether he was in charge. He walked through the restaurant like he owned it. He glanced at her table. He stopped. He looked at her the way people look at something that does not fit the picture they have arranged in their head. Then he walked over, and without a word, reached down and picked up her plate. "We don't want this kind of customer giving the restaurant a bad name," he said. His voice was not even unkind. It was matter of fact, like he was removing a dish from the wrong table. The restaurant went quiet. Not completely, the music still played, the Asoebi women still talked, but the tables nearby went still. A woman 2 tables away stopped chewing. Adenola looked at her empty placemat. Then she looked at Emeka. She reached into her worn leather bag. She placed her phone on the table. She placed the master key beside it. Then she looked up at him and said, very quietly, "Please call your area director. Tell him Adenola is here. He knows my number." Something shifted in the room. She could feel it before she could name it. Emeka opened his mouth. Then he closed it. On the table, her phone lit up. The screen read, "Falik, Igrav T a D letter 1 ECD LIHQ." She let it ring once, twice. She did not look away from Emeka's face. If you are watching this and you have ever been judged before someone knew your name, this story is for you. Smash that like button, subscribe to Stories by Ajibs, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a chapter. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been treated like you didn't belong somewhere? We are reading every single one. See you in the next chapter. Emeka had a smile for every situation. There was the smile he used for VIP guests, wide, practiced, with a slight bow. There was the smile he used for difficult customers, tight, patient, barely reaching his eyes. There was the smile he used for his staff when he wanted them to understand without raising his voice that he was not pleased. He did not have a smile for this. He stood holding Adenola's plate, the jollof rice still steaming, and looked at the master key on the table the way a man looks at something he cannot immediately explain, but knows, somewhere deep and instinctive, is very bad news. "Madam," he said carefully, "I don't know what." "Call Director Segun," Adenola said again. Same quiet voice, same steady eyes. "Tell him Adenola is at the Victoria Island branch. He will understand." Emeka's jaw tightened. He set the plate down, not back in front of her, but on the edge of the table, like a compromise, and pulled out his own phone. Adenola watched him dial. She watched his face as the line connected. She watched the exact moment everything changed. She could not hear what Segun said on the other end, but she saw Emeka's shoulders drop. She saw the color leave the back of his neck. She saw his free hand reach for the back of a chair as if he needed something to hold. He lowered the phone slowly. He looked at Adenola Bamidele, her faded purple wrapper, her rubber slippers, her black head scarf, the thin gold ring worn smooth on her right hand, and she saw the moment he understood. Not just who she was, but what he had done. She did not smile. She did not need to. "Sit down, Emeka," she said. "We will talk, but not yet. First, I would like to finish my lunch." Nobody moved for a moment. Then Chitty appeared from nowhere with a fresh plate, the proper presentation this time, the fish placed with care, a small garnish of sliced tomatoes on the side. He set it before her with hands that were not entirely steady. Adenola ate her jollof rice slowly. It was, as it had always been, very good. Around her, the restaurant exhaled and resumed. The Soebi women started talking again. The man in the suit ordered dessert, but the tables nearest to her remained quiet, the way places go quiet after something significant has passed through. Emeka stood to the side, hands clasped in front of him, waiting. He had the look of a man rehearsing apologies in his head and finding none of them adequate. Adenola noticed all of this. She also noticed something else. Near the far wall, close to the side entrance that led to the back corridor, the entrance used by the cleaning staff, a woman was mopping. She had been mopping when Adenola arrived. She was still mopping now, methodical and quiet, working her way around the edges of the room with the focused patience of someone who understood that the floor needed to be clean regardless of what the people above it were doing. Her name tag, partially visible above her gray uniform, said Ngozi. She was perhaps 55, small and compact, with close-cropped gray hair and hands that knew hard work. While Blessing had been calculating, while Chitty had been evasive, while Emeka had been dismantling a person's dignity with a plate of rice, Ngozi had been doing her job. But that was not why Adenola had noticed her. Adenola had noticed her because of what had happened 20 minutes earlier. In the quiet stretch between her order being ignored and her food finally arriving, when she had been sitting alone at the worst table in the restaurant feeling the weight of every sidelong glance, Ngozi had stopped beside her. Not for long. She had not made a scene of it. She had simply paused her mopping, looked at Adenola directly, and said in a low voice, "Auntie, I want to apologize for how long you are waiting. It is not right. Can I bring you some water while you wait? And there is chin-chin at the welcome station. Let me bring you some. Small thing, but at least your mouth will not be empty." She had not waited for Adenola to answer. She had gone, brought a small plate of chin-chin and a fresh bottle of cold water, placed them gently on the table, and returned to her mopping. She had not done it to be seen. She had not looked around to check if anyone was watching. She had done it the way people do things when kindness is simply who they are, without performance, without calculation, without any expectation of return. Adenola had eaten the chin-chin quietly and thought, "This one. I want to know about this one." After she finished her lunch, she stood, straightened her wrapper, and picked up her bag and her master key. "Emeka," she said, "my office, 30 minutes. She turned and walked toward the back corridor. She knew the layout of this building the way she knew her own hands. She had approved every wall, every door, every room. She found the manager's office, unlocked it with her master key, and sat down behind the desk to wait. She looked around the room. It was neat, organized. A printed staff rotor on the wall, a monthly target sheet, a small Lagos United calendar. Emeka was, she noted, an orderly man. Orderly men sometimes confused order with superiority. They confused a clean desk with a clean conscience. He knocked exactly at 30 minutes. She would give him that. He entered and sat across from her, in his own office, across from a woman he had tried to remove from her own restaurant not 1 hour ago. The symmetry of it seemed to settle on him like a physical weight. How long have you worked at Igrav Tia di Letterwani CDLA? She asked. 2 years, Ma. In those 2 years, how many customers do you think you have treated the way you treated me today? He opened his mouth, closed it. Ma, I am not asking for an apology yet, she said. I am asking you a question. How many? The silence was long enough to be its own answer. Adenola placed both hands flat on the desk. I built this restaurant to be a place where anyone could walk through that door and feel like they mattered. A market woman, a professor, a bus driver, a senator, anyone. That was the foundation. That was the whole point. She paused. You have been using my foundation to build something else entirely. Emeka stared at the desk. I will not shout, she continued. I will not make a scene, but I want you to understand something clearly before you leave this office today. She looked at him steadily. The way you treat people who cannot do anything for you, that is your true character. Not the way you treat VIPs. Not the way you talk to me right now. The way you treated an old woman in a faded wrapper who only wanted to eat her rice in peace. She stood. Go back to the floor. Do your shift. We will speak again tomorrow with Director Segun present. He stood as well, straightened his jacket from habit, and moved toward the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. Ma, he said quietly, I am sorry. I know, she said, but sorry is the beginning of a conversation, Emeka, not the end of one. He left. Adenola sat back down. She opened her phone and typed a short message to Falik. Find out everything about the cleaner named Ngozi at the VI branch. How long she has worked here. Her record. Her story. Everything. She set the phone down and looked at the wall. Outside the office, she could hear the restaurant, the clatter of plates, the low pulse of music, the murmur of lunch conversations winding down. Her restaurant. Still standing. Still full. She thought about a woman mopping quietly around the edges of someone else's humiliation, stopping only long enough to offer chin-chin and cold water, not because anyone was watching, but because it was the right thing to do. Some people, Adenola thought, carry their character like a uniform. It never comes off. Falik Ademi had worked for Adenola Bamidele for 11 years. She had started as a front desk assistant at the very first Igrav T Adi Letterwani CD LA location in Surulur, back when the restaurant was still small enough that everyone knew everyone's lunch order. She had watched the business grow from 1 room to 3 locations. She had watched her boss work 18-hour days without complaint, drive herself to the hospital once with a minor burn from a cooking accident rather than interrupt a staff meeting, and cry exactly once. The night the Surulur branch flooded during a storm and they lost 2 weeks of dry goods storage. Falik knew Adenola. She knew what it meant when Adenola sent a quiet, short message late in the afternoon. It meant something had happened, something real. She had the report ready by 8 o'clock the next morning. Adenola read it at her kitchen table in Lekki, still in her house clothes, cup of tea cooling beside her. Ngozi Ez, 57 years old, originally from Ennui in Anambra State, living now in Agegunnel with her youngest daughter and 2 grandchildren. She had been with Igrav T Adi Letterwani CD LA Victoria Island for 4 years, longer than Emeka, longer than Chitty, longer than Blessing. She had been hired initially as a kitchen assistant, moved to the cleaning team after a restructuring 18 months ago, and had never once in 4 years received a query, a warning, or a complaint. What she had received, 3 times, was a commendation from the previous manager, a woman named Mrs. Peters who had retired to Port Harcourt, noting Ngozi's reliability, her care with equipment, and what Mrs. Peters had written in the last commendation as an uncommon decency that lifts the atmosphere of any room she works in. Adenola read that line twice. She turned the page. Falik, thorough as always, had included a note at the bottom. She has applied twice for a supervisory role, once for a floor supervisor position, once for a kitchen team lead. Both times she was passed over. No formal reason given on either occasion. I checked with HR. One reviewer's notes from the second application described her as, and I am quoting directly, better suited to her current role. No further explanation. Adenola set the report down. She picked up her tea. It was cold now, but she drank it anyway. Better suited to her current role. She had seen this before. She had lived a version of this before, the quiet, persistent underestimation of women who did not present themselves in ways that power recognized. Women who wore their competence without announcement. Women who were so busy doing the actual work that they had no time left to perform ambition for the people who controlled their futures. She had been one of those women once. In a different kitchen, in a different city, before Ajibs T a D-letter-1 existed, and before anyone knew her name. She closed the report and called Falek. "I want to meet her," Adinola said. "Not at the restaurant, somewhere neutral, arrange it quietly." "Yes, Ma, should I tell her why?" Adinola thought for a moment. "Tell her the CEO would like to thank her personally for her hospitality yesterday. That is all." They met 2 days later at a small bucca in Suruller that Adinola had loved for 20 years. It was the kind of place that had no pretension: plastic chairs, a handwritten menu on a chalkboard, a ceiling fan that worked only on its highest setting. Adinola arrived first and ordered 2 plates of afada rice before Ngozi walked in. Ngozi entered carefully, the way people enter spaces they are not sure they have been invited into correctly. She was wearing a good blouse, floral, neatly pressed, and her close-cropped gray hair was freshly shaped. She had made an effort. Adinola noticed and felt something warm move through her. "Ngozi," she said, standing. "Sit down, the afada is already coming." Ngozi sat. She looked at Adinola. Then she looked again, more carefully, in the way people look when a face is familiar but the context is wrong. "You were at the restaurant," she said slowly. "The day before yesterday, table by the kitchen door." "Yes," Adinola said. "You are the—" Ngozi stopped. Her hand went to her mouth briefly. "You are Madame Adinola. You are the owner." "I am." The afada arrived. Neither of them touched it for a moment. "I did not know," Ngozi said quietly. "When I brought the chin-chin, I did not know who you were." "I know," Adinola said. "That is exactly why I am here." They ate together and they talked. Adinola asked questions and Ngozi answered them, not with the careful, rehearsed answers people give when they think they are being assessed, but with the direct simplicity of someone who had nothing to hide and had long ago stopped pretending otherwise. She had come to Lagos from Ennui 22 years ago with her husband, who had died of a sudden illness 9 years later and left her with 3 children and a rented room. She had worked everything: a provision store, a catering assistant job in Aiksha, a school canteen in Yaba. She had put 2 of her 3 children through university by her own hands. The youngest was still in Polytechnic. She had come to Ajibs T a D-letter-1 4 years ago because the pay was steady and the environment was, in her words, cleaner than most, not just the floors, the people too, mostly. "Mostly," Adinola repeated gently. Ngozi was quiet for a moment. Then she said, carefully, "Some of the young ones, they forget that every person who walks through that door is somebody. They see the clothes before they see the person." She paused. "My mother used to say you cannot tell the weight of a stone by its color." Adinola set down her fork. "Why did you bring me the chin-chin?" she asked. "You did not have to. It was not your table. It was not your job." Ngozi looked at her as though the question was slightly puzzling. "Because you were sitting there a long time and nobody was attending to you properly," she said simply. "It was not right. A person came to eat. They should eat." She shrugged, a small, honest shrug. "It cost me nothing. A small plate of chin-chin and some water. But to somebody sitting alone feeling invisible, sometimes a small thing is not a small thing." Adinola looked at this woman across a plastic table with a ceiling fan running on high and afada rice between them, and thought about all the interviews she had conducted over 14 years. All the managers she had hired and trained. All the people she had watched perform leadership. The confidence, the vocabulary, the polished answers about vision and strategy and team management. And then she thought about a woman who mopped floors and brought cold water to strangers, not because anyone was watching, but because it was the right thing to do. A woman who had been passed over twice because someone, somewhere, had looked at her, and decided she was better suited to her current role. "Ngozi," Adenola said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer me honestly, not carefully. Can you do that?" "Yes, Ma." "If someone gave you the chance, the real chance, with proper training and proper support, do you believe you could lead people?" Ngozi did not answer immediately. She looked at the table. She looked at her hands, those work-worn hands that had cleaned floors and raised children and carried this city in ways it would never think to thank her for. Then she looked up. "I have been leading people my whole life," she said quietly. "Nobody just called it that before. This story is just getting started, and we need you here for every chapter. Smash that like button, subscribe to Stories by Ajibs, and hit that notification bell so you never miss what comes next. Drop a comment. Do you know a Ngozi in your life? Someone who gave without expecting anything back. Tell us about them. We are reading every word. See you in the next chapter." Director Segun Adebio had worked in the IGRAV-T, a D-1ECD-LA organization, for 7 years. He was a careful man, precise in his speech, precise in his appearance, precise in the way he managed the 3 Lagos branches under his supervision. He wore his responsibility like a well-fitted agbada, with awareness of how it looked from every angle. He had never, in 7 years, received a call like the one he had received 2 days ago. He arrived at the Victoria Island branch at 9 o'clock sharp, 40 minutes before the restaurant opened for the day. He had not slept well. He had gone over the situation from every angle he could think of and had arrived at the same conclusion each time. There was no good side of this to stand on. Emeka was already there when he arrived. Sitting in the small conference room adjacent to the manager's office, back straight, hands folded on the table. He looked like a man who had spent 2 days preparing himself for something he could not prepare for. Segun sat down across from him and said nothing for a long moment. "You know why we are here," he said finally. "Yes, sir." "Tell me what happened, in your own words." Emeka told him. He did not minimize. Segun would give him that. When the accounting came, the young man did not try to negotiate with the truth. He described the afternoon clearly. The assessment he had made at the door, the table he had allowed the hostess to assign, the plate he had taken, the words he had used. When he finished, the room was very quiet. "How many times?" Segun asked. Emeka looked up. "Sir, how many times have you done something like this? Not this exactly, but this, deciding who deserves the full experience and who does not. How many times?" The silence that followed was, again, its own answer. Segun rubbed his face with both hands. He was not a man given to visible frustration, but it was there now, sitting plainly on his features. "Emeka, I trained you myself. When you came to this organization, I sat with you for 2 weeks, and I told you personally, that the philosophy of IGRAV-T a D-1ECD-LA is dignity for every person who walks through that door. Every person." "I remember, sir." "Then what happened?" Emeka looked at the table. When he spoke, his voice was lower than it had been. "I think," he said slowly, "I think I started to believe that I was protecting something. The reputation, the atmosphere. I told myself I was maintaining a standard." He paused. "But the truth is I was making judgments that were not mine to make. I was deciding people's worth before they had said a single word to me." It was, Segun thought, possibly the most honest thing he had ever heard Emeka say. It did not fix anything, but it was real. Adenola arrived at 9:45. She was dressed differently today. A deep burgundy kaftan, embroidered at the collar and cuffs with matching slippers. Her locks were loose around her shoulders. She wore small gold earrings and her mother's ring. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had built something significant and knew it. She greeted Segun warmly, nodded at Emeka, and sat down at the head of the table. She had a single folder in front of her. She did not open it immediately. "I want to say something before we begin," she said. "I did not come here to destroy anyone. That has never been how I operate. I came here because I needed to understand what was happening inside my own restaurant, and now I understand it." She looked at Emeka steadily. "What happened to me on Tuesday was wrong." but I am more troubled by what it tells me about what has been happening to other people. Ordinary customers who came here to eat and left feeling like they were not welcome in their own city. Emeka nodded once. His jaw was tight. I have made a decision, Adenola continued, and I want to be direct about it. She opened the folder. Emeka, you will not continue as manager of this branch. The words landed in the room and stayed there. Emeka closed his eyes briefly, opened them. I understand, Ma. You are not being dismissed from the organization, she said. That is not what this is. You are being moved to a retraining program that Segun will design. 6 weeks. You will work the floor not as a manager, as a staff member. You will take orders. You will clean tables. You will greet every customer who walks through that door regardless of what they are wearing. She paused. At the end of 6 weeks, I will review your progress personally. If you have learned what I need you to learn, we will discuss your future here. If you have not, then that will tell me everything I need to know. Emeka looked at her for a long moment. Something moved across his face, complicated and difficult to name. It was not quite gratitude, and it was not quite relief. It was something more uncomfortable than both. The particular feeling of being treated with more fairness than you extended to someone else. Thank you, Ma, he said quietly. Do not thank me yet, she said. The work is ahead of you. After Emeka left the room, Segun looked at Adenola with the expression of a man with a question he was deciding whether to ask. The manager position, he said. Who are you considering? Adenola opened the folder to the second page and slid it across the table toward him. It was Falake's report on Ngozi, the commendations from Mrs. Peters, the 2 failed applications for supervisory roles, the HR note about being better suited to her current role. Segun read it carefully. He looked up. The cleaner. His voice was neutral, not dismissive, but genuinely uncertain. Her name is Ngozi Ez, Adenola said. She has been with this branch for 4 years. She has 3 commendations and 0 complaints. She was passed over for supervisor twice for reasons that no one properly documented. She folded her hands on the table. I had lunch with her yesterday in Surulur. I asked her questions for 2 hours. I want you to meet her. She has no management experience. I had no restaurant experience when I opened Igrov T a D letter 1 ECDLA, Adenola said simply. What I had was the right character. Character can carry a person through training. Training cannot give a person character. She looked at him. Emeka had the experience. You saw what he did with it. Segun looked at the report again. He was a fair man underneath the precision. It was why Adenola had kept him for 7 years. What would the transition look like? He asked. Structured, she said. 3 months supervised with a senior mentor from the Surulur branch. Formal management training, which the organization will pay for fully. A review at 90 days. She paused. She will not be thrown into the deep water alone. That is not how I do things. Segun nodded slowly. I would like to meet her. I know, Adenola said. I have already asked her to come in at 11. Ngozi arrived 7 minutes early. She was wearing the same floral blouse from the Bucca in Surulur, freshly pressed again. She walked into the conference room and greeted Segun with both hands extended in the respectful Igbo way, unhurried and unafraid. She sat down and answered every question he asked her with the same quality Adenola had encountered over afada rice, direct, honest, unperformed. When Segun asked her what she would change about the Victoria Island branch if she could change one thing, she did not hesitate. The culture of looking at people before you listen to them, she said. We need to teach the young ones that every customer is carrying something we cannot see, a hard week, a lonely afternoon, a small celebration nobody else knows about. They came here to eat, yes, but they also came here to feel like they matter. She looked at Segun calmly. That is what a good restaurant gives people, not just food, dignity. Segun looked at Adenola. Adenola looked at Ngozi. When can you start? She asked. Ngozi blinked once. Start what, Ma? Your new role, Adenola said, as manager of this branch. The room was very quiet. Outside, Lagos was doing what Lagos always did, loud, relentless, full of itself. But in that small conference room in Victoria Island, A woman who had mopped floors and been passed over and brought cold water to strangers without anyone watching sat completely still. Then her eyes filled. She did not let the tears fall. She pressed her lips together and breathed and looked at the ceiling briefly the way people do when they are trying to hold something large inside a small moment. "I can start," she said, "whenever you need me." The announcement came on a Thursday morning. Segun gathered the full Victoria Island staff at 8 o'clock, 1 hour before the restaurant opened. They stood in the main dining area: waiters, kitchen staff, hostesses, the bar team, the cleaning crew, arranged loosely between the dark wood tables and the amber light that Adenola had chosen years ago because she had wanted the room to feel like warmth. Emeka was there too. He stood at the edge of the group in plain clothes, no manager's uniform, no gold trim, no Igrav T a D-letter-1 ECD-LA crest, just a simple dark shirt and trousers. He had started his floor retraining 2 days earlier. Blessing had watched him take a customer's order on his first day, with an expression she had quickly rearranged when she noticed Segun watching. Ngozi stood near the back of the room beside the 2 women she worked with on the cleaning team, Mama Chisholm, and a young girl named Ajibs who was working her way through a hospitality program at a Lagos Polytechnic. Ngozi had her hands clasped in front of her. She was wearing her gray cleaning uniform because nobody had told her to wear anything else. She did not yet know why they had all been gathered. Segun stood at the front of the room and waited for the small talk to settle. "Good morning," he said. "I will not take long because we have a full day ahead. But there are 2 things that need to be said to this team, and they need to be said together in the same room so that everyone hears the same thing at the same time." The room listened. Last Tuesday, the founder and CEO of Igrav T a D-letter-1 ECD-LA restaurant group, Madame Adenola Bamidele, visited this branch as a private customer. She was not announced. She came to observe. He let that sit for a moment. What she observed was not acceptable. A customer, any customer, was made to feel unwelcome in this restaurant. A plate of food that had been ordered and paid for was taken from her table. She was spoken to in a manner that has no place in any establishment, let alone this one. The room had gone very still. Chitty was looking at the floor. Blessing had her arms folded and her eyes straight ahead with the rigid focus of someone trying not to show what they were feeling. "The individual responsible has been removed from the management position and is undergoing a full retraining process," Segun continued. "This is not a punishment designed to humiliate. It is a correction. This organization believes in second chances, but it believes in them honestly, which means the work must be done." He paused. "The second thing," he looked toward the back of the room. "Ngozi Ez." Every head turned. Ngozi looked up. Her expression was careful and open at the same time. "On the same afternoon that a customer was being made to feel invisible in this restaurant," Segun said, "one member of this team chose differently, without instruction, without an audience, without any reason except that it was the right thing to do. She stopped her work, acknowledged a fellow human being, and offered what small comfort she could." He looked at her directly. "That is the culture of Igrav T a D-letter-1 ECD-LA. That is what this restaurant was built on." And it was being lived out, quietly, without any fanfare, by a woman most of you have worked beside for 4 years without perhaps fully seeing. Mama Chisholm, standing next to Ngozi, reached over and took her hand. "Effective today," Segun said, "Ngozi Ez is the new branch manager of Igrav T a D-letter-1 ECD-LA Victoria Island." The sound that moved through the room was not applause, not at first. It was something more involuntary than that. A collective exhale, a murmur that passed from person to person like a current finding its way through water. Then Adiz, the young Polytechnic student who had worked beside Ngozi for 7 months, started clapping. It was just her at first, young and unself-conscious and unworried about what it looked like. Then Mama Chisholm joined. Then the kitchen team at the back. Then, one by one, the rest of the room. Ngozi stood very straight. Her chin was up. Her eyes were bright and she was pressing her lips together again in that way she had holding something large inside a small moment. She looked across the room and found Emeka's face. He was clapping too, slowly but genuinely. He met her eyes and gave a single nod, the kind of nod that carries more words than most speeches. She returned it, small, dignified, complete. Adenola was not in the room for the announcement. She had chosen deliberately to stay away. This moment belonged to Ngozi, and she had not wanted her presence to pull the focus sideways. She had learned long ago that the most powerful thing a leader could sometimes do was step out of the frame entirely and let the right person stand in the light alone. She was at the Surler branch when Falik sent her a voice note at 8:23. It was just 7 seconds long. It was the sound of a room full of people clapping. Adenola listened to it twice. Then she set her phone down and looked out at the street outside, the early morning Lagos street with its Okada riders and its bread sellers and its 1,000 quiet urgencies, and allowed herself 1 full minute of stillness. 14 years, 400,000 naira and a borrowed pot and a mother's stubbornness. 3 locations, hundreds of staff, thousands of customers, all of it built on one simple belief that every person who walked through her door deserved to feel that they mattered. She had nearly let that belief be buried under gold trim and a manager's ego. But the thing about a true foundation, she thought, is that it does not disappear when someone builds wrong things on top of it. It waits. It holds. And when you come back to it, when you clear away everything that should not have been there, it is exactly as solid as the day you laid it. 3 months later, the Victoria Island branch received its highest customer satisfaction rating in its entire history. The feedback portal, the same one where an anonymous message had started everything, filled steadily with comments. People wrote about the food as they always had, but they also wrote, again and again, about something harder to name. The way the staff greeted them. The way a table near the window was always kept for walk-in guests who needed somewhere to sit. The way the manager, a small woman with close-cropped gray hair and work-worn hands, sometimes came out of her office just to check that every person in the room had what they needed. One comment, posted on a Friday evening by a woman who described herself only as a grandmother from Gbagada who took the bus, said simply, "I have been to many fine restaurants in this city. This is the first one where I felt like the person who built it actually meant for me to be there." Adenola read it in her apartment in Lekki, early in the morning with her tea. She forwarded it to Ngozi with a single line. "This is the whole point. You understand it. Keep going." Ngozi read it on her lunch break, sitting in the small manager's office that now had a new calendar on the wall, a photograph of the Niger River at dawn, wide and golden and unhurried. She read it twice. Then she put her phone in her pocket, straightened her jacket, the black fabric, gold trim, I Tia D letter 1 ECDL A crest on the breast pocket, and walked back out onto the floor. There were customers to attend to. Every single one of them mattered. And that, my people, is how a story is supposed to end. If this moved you, if you felt something watching Ngozi get everything she deserved, then smash that like button right now, subscribe to Stories by Ajibs, and turn on your notification bell so you never miss a single story. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment. What was your favorite moment in this story? We want to know. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your love, and we will see you in the next one. God bless you.